A year ago, on her way back from work, my girlfriend was attacked. She survived, but she's never been the same. We've been trying to fix things for the past year, but the more I try, the more I feel like I'm losing her. I know I will sound like a total jerk, and I'm ready to face the backlash for this, but honestly, I need to get my feelings out there. This is going to be a long one because honestly, I don't know where to start. Maybe just being able to vent a little will do. It's already 1 year and a month since my girlfriend, while going out of work, was sexually assaulted. Fortunately, she survived, but I must say that it was really a harrowing experience. The perpetrator was armed, and although he didn't hurt her to the extent of killing her, he left deep and wide emotional and psychological scars on her psyche. They had cameras at the store where she worked, so in addition to the DNA evidence, he was caught within a day. He didn't even plea bargain. He just pleaded guilty to avoid the maximum sentence. The judge sentenced him to 20 years, but if he's been good, he'll be out in about 10 years. Let me share all this as that is my point. He is no longer any threat to her. She doesn't have to fear him returning, at least for a while. Both of us had gone through a profound emotional pondering. I can hardly begin to understand the trauma she went through. However, it has also been pretty tricky for me. Then I fell into dark bouts of depression, grappling with the realization that I couldn't protect her when she needed me most, or in this case, from someone. The knowledge that some violation had occurred in that horrific way almost proved too much. She didn't want to see me right after it happened. I understood the course I did. It hurt like hell, but I understood. Her parents took her back home from the hospital, and I did not hear anything from her for a week. Knowing she was okay, I wanted to reach out but respected the space. Of course, at some point, her sister called me to inform me that my girlfriend was staying with them and that she would reach out soon, but that call never came through. Instead, I received a new text from her sister, asking me to come over for a brief talk. When I arrived, her mother was at the door. Her disposition was calm yet icy. She laid out a set of rules for me, how to act and what to say. She informed me not to touch my girlfriend in any form. It was all so surreal. I could feel that therapists probably had instructed them on how to take care of this, so I tried to go along. Inside, my girlfriend sat in a chair with her dad beside her and her sister on the couch. The atmosphere suffocated. Her sister spoke for her, saying that my girlfriend was all right but traumatized and appreciated my understanding of her at her time of recovery. She didn't say a word to me or hardly looked in my direction. I realized this was a major life-altering event for her. I wanted to stand beside her, but that awkward conversation was unbearable. It made its way back into my head, and after going home, I tried to direct my mind to how I could help her. As a result of it, I started researching ways how to assist someone who becomes a sexual assault survivor. I read hundreds of pieces of literature, watched countless videos, and even joined online forums where several people share their experiences. I was desperate to understand what she was going through and how I could be a part of her healing process. She started therapy, going twice a week, then gradually reducing it to once a week. Finally, she came to me. She wanted to meet me at a coffee shop. When I got there, she was already sitting. I was disappointed when I saw her because they had actually medicated on her so much that she was practically unrecognizable. Her eyes were dull, and she lost all her glow on her skin. She spoke with a monotone, robotic tone, saying she needed time to handle her issues. Of course, I understood. It had almost been a month since the attack, and I wanted to be there for her. I told her I would give her all the support in my power, whether she needed space or a shoulder to cry on. But when I started telling her how I felt for her, she cut me off and said she didn't want to hear that. The situation hurt and surprised me, but I tried to respect her wishes. The next day, she texted me with small talk that I took as a good sign, and we carried on this way for about a month and a half. Finally, I proposed taking her to dinner, but 2 days later she said she needed to discuss it with her therapist first. She agreed eventually, but we scheduled it for another month later. The attack had already lasted close to 4 months, and so far I only got to hear 2 awkward conversations with her. I was kept in the dark about the progress made so far. I am not a family, but a simple update would mean a lot. It was remarkable that when we finally managed to meet for dinner at a small restaurant we always went to, I waited for her to arrive. After half an hour, I texted to check in since she didn't seem to be appearing. She replied, "On my way." When she finally arrived, I asked her how she had been. She snapped back, saying I shouldn't ask her personal questions. We didn't talk, but after dinner, I wanted to speak, to reconnect. For 3 years, I had sorely missed the girl I knew. But now she'd finished eating and said she wanted to go home. I asked her to stay a little longer, but I could see the anxiety rising, so I didn't want to push her, so I just said I loved and missed her. She just got up and left. The very next day, she started texting as if nothing had happened. We started meeting for lunch once a week, and over time, she kept opening up more about things, including the fact that she'd recently taken a new job. For the first time in months, I was starting to feel hopeful. Weeks turned to months, weighing me down with loneliness. She didn't turn up for lunch one afternoon. I tried sending her text messages, but she didn't even reply. I started getting anxious. I called her parents for answers, but they always ran around in circles. I just wanted to know whether she was okay. Her mom finally told me she was fine but wasn't coming out anytime soon. Panic set in. I worried that she had relapsed or worse. 2 weeks went by and no words. Irritation was building inside me, and finally, I contacted her sister just to check if she was still alive. She apologized, telling me that my girl had obviously given strict instructions not to let me see or talk to her. That was it for me. I felt totally helpless and alone. She texted me asking if I could meet her at a therapist's office, which I hurried over after leaving work early. A therapist greeted me and said that my girlfriend wanted to talk and that she'd be in shortly. I could feel the anxiety welling up inside of me, my heart beating wildly as I sat in that sterile room. She walked in, and my heart dropped. She was there with tissues running down her face from tears. The therapist then explained why my girlfriend hadn't met me for lunch that day. She had been with another guy, someone from a new job, and they had been intimated with one another. That's a punch right to the gut. I couldn't breathe. I just dropped my head and started crying. The therapist tried to reason with me. She said my girlfriend was reclaiming her sexuality because of the assault. I felt totally helpless, gang raped by them, and powerless. The more they spoke, the more frustrated I got. Finally, I took her a piece. "You haven't even held my hand in months, yet you can sleep with some guy you just met." She broke down crying. The therapist ordered me to leave. I managed to do that, barely keeping myself together. Later that same day, she texted, begging to talk as she averred that it was the biggest mistake of her life. I agreed to meet with her again, but clarified that I couldn't continue our relationship unless she closed the door with the other guy. That would not be possible, she said, because they worked together. Anger rushed over me. "I cannot be with you if you are going to see him daily," I told her. It was then that I sat down to talk with my sister, whom I shared my story with during this whole ordeal, and found some information that women who went through traumas sought intimacy to recapture normalcy. I did not understand why I was not her first port of call, and it somehow felt like I was being punished for something I did not do. She moved jobs, and we started having lunches again. This routine tired me, and I finally told her I wanted much more from her than a casual meetup. And so, she eventually agreed to come over and watch some TV with me. We spent that night watching movies and having pizza. I kissed her in the second film. All I wanted was a kiss. I hadn't planned anything more. She drew back as if I were a monster and told me she wasn't ready. I exploded in anger. "It's over a year now. I abided by your limits. I waited while you had someone else, and now you can't even kiss?" She began to cry, but I did not run to apologize. I assured her I would never make her do something she did not want. Yet somehow I felt as though I was standing on the outside looking in. The reality of being cheated on hit me squarely. I did not care what label they called it. She had chosen someone else over me. I told her that I needed some time to think about things. I assured her I would see her the following week, but I could not promise that I would not be unfair to her. It had been a year, and we were closer to where we had started. I had no idea how long this would take. The days were an endless loop. Night after night, I replayed every conversation, each passing moment together, desperate to figure out where we went wrong. I was pacing up and down my tiny apartment, carrying all the world's weight on my shoulders. The bright, vibrant colors of life had dulled into shades of gray. She was making me miss her laugh, her smile, the way she lit up a room just by walking into it. But now, everything was a chore and a jarring reminder of what we had lost. And then the week had to pass, and I was sitting in the cafe, tapping my foot against the ground nervously as I waited for her to arrive, and arriving so much ahead of time that with the bitter taste of coffee, I was hoping to compose my nerves. In walked this girl. My heart raced. She seemed almost familiar, yet foreign at the same time, eyes going into considerable shadow from the burden of experience. And she hesitated at the door as if she were having second thoughts about coming inside, but she came over and sat down with a nervous smile like a fragile truce. "Hey," she said softly, barely above a whisper over the phone. I could tell that she was just as nervous as I was. "Hey," I said, sounding calmer than I felt. "Thanks for seeing me." We sat there a little while in silence. Thick as unspoken words hung between us. I took an open breath, gathering my thoughts. "I have been thinking a great deal about us, everything that happened." She nodded, seriousness crossing her face. "Me too." "I love you," I said, my heart reeling. "But do I know if I can keep on doing this? It feels like we are stuck in a cycle of pain, and I don't know how to break it." I saw tears well up in her eyes, and my chest constricted as I gazed upon her. "I know I have hurt you terribly, and I'm sorry, it's just... I'm trying to come back from everything. I thought I was getting better, then just spiraled." I leaned across the table to touch and comfort her, and she wincingly winced again. It was a painful reminder of how fragile she was and how much assault had affected her. "I understand, but I can't be the only one trying to hold this together," I said. "It's not fair to either of us." She dropped her eyes to the table, writhing in what to say. "I didn't mean to pull you away. I just didn't know how to be this for you after everything. I don't need you to be someone else," I said, my voice firm yet gentle. "I want to know you want to be with me, that you're fighting for us." She looked up, and for just a second, I got hold of the glint of that girl that made me love her. "I want to be with you," she said. "But I just don't know how." We talked for hours. We discussed our deepest fears and insecurities. I could talk about how abandoned I felt, while she could talk about feeling overwhelmed by shame and guilt. She would learn that she felt a loss of self. In other words, she had become a stranger to her body and herself. When the sun was setting and casting a warm glow through the coffee shop window, we reached a fragile agreement. We would go together to couples therapy, a place where we could rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It was a small step, but it was a step nonetheless. We took that step during the following weeks and plunged into therapy sessions that compelled us to face our pain head-on. There were moments of progress, where laughter would bubble up amidst the tears, and then there would be setbacks threatening to pull us back. One night spent wrapped in a blanket, sitting on the couch, watching this old movie with her leaning against me that night, and her head touching my shoulder. One can almost see what we once were here, but to what small detail this connection must seem slight. I wanted to pen her in and protect her from the outrageousness of the world, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that it wasn't over yet and that the past was still waiting to strike at my defense. "Do you ever think we'll ever be the same?" She finally broke the comfortable silence. I paused, weighing every word carefully with a measured tone. "I don't know, but I do know that I believe we can be better. We just have to keep fighting for it." She threads her fingers through mine, and it feels as if everything is all right for a second. But days become weeks, become months. She draws further and further away from me. Bad days. Walls come crashing down on her, and she withdraws. I can admit that it has been damn frustrating. Sometimes, I don't know whether to feel pathetic or angry. She messaged me to catch up at her therapist's office one day. I had that sinking feeling of an argument with another struggle when I got to the office, where I found her sitting with her therapist, looking more disoriented than ever. The latter told me that my girlfriend had been experiencing feelings of inadequacy and guilt, thinking she wasn't worthy of love or happiness. She told me gently, "You need to understand that healing is not linear. She'll be up some days and down others, and is now when she needs you." I nodded hard, my eyes drying while they streamed red. "I just want to help her," I said, "but I don't know how long I can do this if she doesn't let me into her life." Her therapist looked at me with a nod of understanding. "You people need to sit down and discuss your requirements and boundaries. You can vent frustration, but must also be patient and compassionate." We sat silently after the session, the unspoken words looming over the place. Finally, I broke the silence. I am terrified, you know? Terrified you're running away from me all over again. She looked down at the ground. Tears sprang up in her eyes. I don't want to hurt you, she said. It is just that everything seems so confused, and I feel like I am wandering in a thick fog. I cannot carry it all on my shoulders, I confessed. I love you, but there must be a need to know you're in this with me. Otherwise, it feels like I am waiting for you to return to me. We sat silently, without saying a word, wrestling with our fears and insecurities. At that point, I realized that love is not when one stands by a person in pain, but when one can live honestly with each other and tell each other what one needs. The week turned into months, and our journey has been the most challenging part of life. There were nights full of laughter, but there were nights when she would wake up screaming due to nightmares, and I'd hold her tight, whispering that she was all right. But the longer the emotional merry-go-round, the more tired I became. In fact, I even began to doubt if I was holding on to my own happiness just for this future, one that appeared increasingly uncertain. Finally, in one of our therapy sessions, I voiced my concerns. I feel that I'm losing myself amidst all these. I want to be there for you, but I cannot keep putting my needs first. Her therapist nodded, helping us along the way during the session. You both must learn to understand your emotions and strive for the middle ground regarding your relationship. Healing is a long process. Rebuilding trust and intimacy is just as long. My girl gazed at me, the pain written clearly on her face. Her voice cracked as she said, I know both of us have been hurting. I don't want to keep you in limbo. You deserve to be happy. Both of us knew that love was not enough to mend everything. It requires effort, communication, and the willingness to face some ghastly truths living in the darkness. In the following weeks, we went through ups and downs in our relationships. However, every step forward was tempered by haunting memories of her trauma, and there were times when I wanted to step out and run away from the heartache that haunted me. However, my love for her kept me anchored. As the summer dawned upon the year, I could feel us growing farther apart, back into that comfortable pattern of avoidance and silence. That evening, we were sitting on my balcony, waiting for the sunset to be over. I felt it was time to bring this issue to the floor in the room. I think we need to talk about where we're headed. I started speaking steadily. I am tired of waiting for you to come back to me. She looked at me, her expression masked, but without as much hold on her voice. I have felt it too, she said, her tears rising. I don't want to drag this out if we're not on the same page. This was the turning point. We realized we had been growing farther apart in our love all that time, and one was too scared to face the truth. I think we need to step back, I said slowly, my heart heavy. I love you, but will not keep sacrificing my happiness for an uncertain future. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's not fair to either of us. We spent the rest of the evening talking and airing everything. It was hellishly painful, but in that naked honesty, we gained closure. We knew it was time to separate and let each other heal. I clasped her tight, goodbye, the weight of our memories, the love we'd fought so hard to hold on to, slipping from my fingers. I knew she'd stay forever in my heart, a bittersweet reminder of what we'd shared amidst the dark. It was a tough decision and needed to happen for both of us. We were two broken souls trying to drive through the after effects of trauma, and sometimes love meant letting go. In the following months, I was again trying to find myself and, in the process, met therapists. These friends saw our journey pass and we became comfortable with ambiguity and finding solace in little things. And yet these scars I bore with me even then, though for the first time in my life, I started to see them not as marks, but as representations of my strength, the ability to get up and walk when there was no future. I often wonder whether she found the peace she needed so desperately. In quieter moments, when the world around me fades, I hope we both will emerge from our battles better, wiser, and ready to face whatever life throws our way.